What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host. My name is John, aka The Martian, and I'm going to be breaking down the UFC 301 pay-per-view for you this week. 14-fight card going down in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, headlined by the UFC Flyweight Championship title fight between Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. And in a co-main event, the King of Rio, one of the greatest fighters of all time, Jose Aldo, returns from a brief retirement to take on Jonathan Martinez in a great fight. And just a top to bottom, pretty solid card. Not a ton of fights that really jump out off the card, Three of the fights on the main card are big, minus 600 favorites, which aren't too compelling. But it's always fun to be in Brazil, to be in, a different country for a card. I'm sure the Brazilian fans will show out, and it's all Brazilian versus foreigner matchups here. So we know what we're expecting from the Brazilian crowd. Brazilian judges usually pretty solid, and I wouldn't say anything too egregious going on, not like we're in Texas or anything, or even Las Vegas at times. But excited for the card this week. Last week's card, I would say, was an okay week of predictions for me. Some fights I nailed, some fights I was way off on. Did good on live bets, as always for me personally. Was way off on the main event for that one, and way off on the Lipsky fight. And let's see what else. The Mays Machado fight I had a little wrong, although predicted the GTD there. I had Petrovic late round props. I had Victor Henry late KO props. The under in the Medic fight. Had pretty good reads of the Onama, the Deniz, and the Guskov fights as well. So I was happy with the week. I definitely came out in profit, but from a lot of live bets as always. So looking to do better this week with the pre-fight bets as always. And before we get into this week's card, I'm going to talk about just a few things because, like I said, this card, it's okay, but it's not the most compelling. I don't expect to talk about these fights too in depth. So I asked Twitter, I said, give me some questions you guys want me to talk about. I'm just going to talk about them for just a few minutes at the start of the card. So to start things off, we have Philosopher Hernan asking about a conspiracy theory between athletic commissions rigging fights because they have interest in certain outcomes from a betting perspective. No truth to that. That is a total, bullshit theory that shitty bettors use to make excuses for when they make a bad bet. Just no validity to that whatsoever. You can chalk any type of inconsistency up to incompetence and not really ill intent. Then we have my man Carl from It's Not Cage Fighting asking which lower ranked fighters or unranked fighters could you see being tough matchups for the champions. I wrote down a few. Most of them honestly are like ranked fighters. They're not exactly unranked, but we'll start things off in the women's divisions. At 115, I think Tatiana Suarez straight up beats Wang. Oh my gosh, I almost called her Wang. Weili Zhang. And I also think Verna Jane Cordoba gives her a tough fight at 125. Very confident that Manon Fiorot beats the champion Alexa Grasso right now. I think even Macy Barber would give her a tough fight this time around, and Natalia Silva is another one. At 135, there's not much here, but I do think that Kayla Harrison would beat Raquel Pennington in that one. Then we'll go over to the men's weight classes. At 125, I think that Minel Kopp is a really bad matchup for the champion in Pantoja. I think he would avenge that loss. 135, I think Umar and obviously Merab are going to beat Sean O'Malley, and I low-key think that Mario Bautista is a future champion as well. That guy's been really improving a lot. At 145, I think Aljamain Sterling is a particularly bad matchup for the champion, Ilia Topuria. And at 155, it's bleak. I really think Islam runs through a lot of those guys, except for Max Holloway. I think Max is the most compelling fight out of that one. 170, same story, pretty bleak, but I do think Shavkat Rakhmonov will beat Leon Edwards if they ever fight. 185 has a lot of fights, man. I really think the DDP is probably the most beatable champion in terms of his weight class. Some guys I wrote down were Nasruddin Imavov, Jack Hermanson, and even Chris Curtis, man. I mean, if Chris Curtis and DDP fought, Dricus du Plessis fought, I really think that's like a 50-50 fight. I mean, they're just going to box with one another. Chris can box at a good pace for 5 rounds. He's tough. He's hard to take down. And I don't know, man. I think that like Chris Curtis would legitimately have a chance to beat DDP, along with a lot of guys at 185. Like Brendan Allen could beat him, the guy who just beat Curtis. So another beatable champion is our boy Alex Poatan Pereira at 205. I think Nikita Krylov would honestly push his shit in. I think Krylov would just take him down, and his pace is relentless. Ankalaev would be another tough matchup, and even Vitor Petrino, I think, is a dark horse who's going to be fighting this weekend. And last but not least, heavyweight. I wrote nobody down. There's nobody at heavyweight who I think is really tough for Aspinall or John Jones. I guess Curtis Blades would be the one that I could think of, but pretty bleak shit there. And another topic. This one is the best question that was asked, honestly. Ryan Barton asked, how has the pandemic changed the UFC as we know it? Low level fights at the apex are the new norm. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but a few points I wrote down. How has the UFC changed since the pandemic? There's lower standards for getting into the UFC. The short notice fighters that are getting signed, even the fighters that are getting signed on full notice, the fighters that are getting brought into the Contender Series, the standards are dropping consistently. The amount of pro experience and fights these guys are having consistently dropping. And the roster is being inflated with more and more Contender Series fighters. When the Contender Series first came out, we might have gotten 1 or 2 people signed per week. Now, 4 or 5 fighters every week. Initially, only the fighters who won by, really impressive finishes were getting signed. Now, you can win an underwhelming, boring decision and still get signed. I mean, the last season of Contender Series, we saw so many guys win boring decisions and still get signed. Dylan Budka stands out as one of those guys. Just an awful fight, awful performance, and he still gets signed and then gets destroyed in his first fight. So, obviously, the Apex cards are a staple of the sport at this point, just boring warehouse fights with no crowd, no intensity, just very, very plain events that aren't exciting to watch. Less travel, obviously that correlates with the Apex. The UFC isn't traveling as much. And when they do travel, most of the time it's to places that subsidize them, like Singapore, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, Utah. All these countries and cities are paying the UFC to do events there. And it's like the UFC is like, why would we go and travel to all these different cities and spend our money when we can just run events in the Apex, run events at T-Mobile Arena, and then get paid for our other events like in Utah or, Abu Dhabi. They maybe do a few fight nights a year now, like the one coming up next week, I think, is in St. Louis, Atlantic City. They did North Carolina. They're doing a little bit of fight nights in America, but just they don't have any incentive to do it anymore. And last but not least, the point I had was the UFC was really hot in 2020 and 2021. I mean, when there weren't any sports on in the pandemic era, May 2020, the UFC was literally the premier sport in the world at that time. And even in 2021, when it was coming back and the crowds were getting in there, I mean, I feel like the UFC was so hot. Like the pay-per-views, they felt, really significant, and having the crowd in the arena for the first time in a year was really fun. And then I just think they totally dropped the ball in the momentum since then. 2022 on have just been, back to running the mill events. They were doing new stuff. They were, setting, new paths in 2020 and 2021. And then they just haven't really taken any risks since then. They've been doing the same stuff. They're still doing 15, 20 events at the Apex every year for purely greed reasons, purely saving money. And that's it. I mean, the ESPN is paying the UFC for 40 events a year. The UFC is like, why would we sell tickets and travel to, cities around America, around the world, when we can just do it for cheaper in the warehouse and make just as much money, if not more? So, those are my thoughts. Like I said, I can go into detail for a real long time about those, but those are, some of my thoughts. Good question by Ryan there. And last but not least, my boy Trotman. Who is your pick for the MMA Capper of the Year at this juncture? Easy choice for me. It's Daniel Tom. Daniel Tom raking in the cash this year, down $3,900. He took a hiatus for a few weeks to clear the mental. Came back, lost like 5 events in a row. Just He tried to take a break, tried to rejuvenate a little bit, didn't really work out, came back with the same betting strategy, was losing left and right, finally got back in the green last week. I think it was his second winning event of the entire year so far. So Dan's down, $5,500 or something like that, $3,900 alone this year. Let's hope he could turn things around. But he is my clear pick for MMA Capper of the Year at this point. Okay, that's enough about that. Enough of an introduction this week. A little bit of a new approach there. Let me know if you guys want me to do more stuff or if that was a total waste of time and you skipped it. Also, let me know, and I will consider never doing it again. So we're starting things off. UFC 301, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. In the flyweight division, Alexandre Costa, Kevin Borjas. Odds for this one have Costa as the favorite, minus 130, Borjas plus 110. Good fight here. I looked into this one a good amount. And I think the Borjas being the underdog is wrong. I think this line should be flipped. And I think that it's pretty simple. When the fight's on the feet, I just favor Kevin Borjas. I think he's the better boxer of the two. I think he covers distance a little better. He's just a lot more fluid and has, I believe, better speed and just punch selection overall. And I think when this fight's on the feet, it's going to be Kevin Borjas outlanding and throwing more strikes and just outboxing Alexandre Costa. Costa has some power, but I mean, his arms are short. He doesn't cover much distance. And I don't know. I just don't think he's super comfortable. He's also very hurtable. He's been, Kai Kara France dropped him several times. Oh, no, I mean, that was Albazi. Dropped him several times. He got rocked versus Erceg. I don't know, man. I'm just not impressed with Costa. And I think if Costa wants to look a favorite here, he's going to need to hit takedowns because Borjas is not a great defensive grappler. However, Costa doesn't really wrestle that reliably. He has hit takedowns at times in his career, but he's not the type of fighter to come out with a game plan to wrestle consistently. So I also liked what Borjas did in that fight against Diaz in the Contender Series, where he was getting taken down in those rounds, and he got back up to his feet, and he had great urgency to throw a bunch of strikes, to land some big shots, and to swing the round back in his favor and to swing him that decision. So even if Costa gets takedowns here, I don't see him doing a whole lot with them, and I think Borjas will eventually get back to his feet and put some volume on him. I think Borjas has the better cardio as well. He slowed down last fight versus Josh Van, but Josh Van landed 55 body shots on him, so you're going to slow down when that happens. So I actually think the Borjas is the money line side, worth a bet at plus money, and I also think this fight is valuable to go over 2.5 rounds and go the distance. It's a flyweight fight, and the fight to go the distance is plus money. I think that's wrong, so the best bet on the fight, I believe, is Borjas money line, followed up by the fight to go the distance and to go over 2.5 rounds. We're moving on. Lightweight division, Ismael Bonfim, Vince Pichel. Odds for this one have Bonfim minus 550, Pichel plus 400. Let's hope Bonfim can make weight this time. This fight was supposed to be in Brazil. The last time they were in Brazil for the Lewis versus Almeida card, and Bonfim missed weight. Pichel declined the fight, as he, rightfully should. I mean, Bonfim's like 13 years younger than this guy, and he still couldn't make weight in his home country in a setup fight. That was pretty pathetic. So, Vince Pichel, though, 41 years old, coming off a 2-year layoff, coming off of comprehensively getting beaten by Marco Madsen, just a horrible loss in retrospect. I have no faith in Vince Pichel. I don't think he will win here. It just seems like a matter of whether it's going to be a Bonfim KO or decision. And, the odds have decision as more likely, but I believe they do. Let's see. The decision is less likely. I think that the fight may be going under 1.5 rounds is the only bet I see value on. It's plus 200 to go under 1.5. So I just think, like, if Vince comes out and just looks super old here and Bonfim starts bombing on him and Vince doesn't have that grit in him anymore, I think there's a good chance this could just be a Bonfim KO 1. So, I mean, the fight to end inside the distance is favored, so it wouldn't really shock me for it to end quick. And so that under 2.5 at plus 200 is the only valuable bet I see. Moving on, women's flyweight division, Diana Barbosa versus Ernesto Kareckaite. Odds for this one have Barbosa as the favorite, minus 232, Kareckaite plus 197. We're going to go with Ernesto here because I'm not even sure if I'm saying that name right. But Barbosa is going to take her down, man. Ernesto is a striker. She's a tall, lanky striker, and she just doesn't look like a good grappler. She had some fights against a woman named, I think, Frot or Brought or something like that. It was like a 4-letter name. Let me see what it is. Yeah, Blot. Blot. She got taken down several times in this fight, just looked bad on bottom. And Barbosa is a jiu-jitsu and judo black belt. Her striking doesn't look good, and Kareckaite probably is going to hit her while she's on the feet, but Kareckaite doesn't have power. I mean, she landed almost 200 strikes in the Contender Series and never really had her opponent hurt. And I just think that even if Kareckaite is having striking success, Barbosa is just going to plow forward, find a way to get a takedown here, and probably just destroy her and from top position, getting a finish. But the bet I have on the fight is the fight for Barbosa to win by knockout at plus 2,200. I mean, the sub is all the way down at, let's see, plus 185, plus 200. I'm just taking a small flyer on the KO, plus 2,200 in case Barbosa finds her way to a TKO, mounted, ground and pound TKO of some sort. So, I think there's a really good chance that Barbosa just gets easy takedowns, and Kareckaite is a total fish on bottom here. So the finish I think should be live for Barbosa, and at 22-1, less than 5% for a KO. Let's just play it small and hope for the best here on that one. So we're moving on to the lightweight division. Marcio Ruffy taking on Jamie Mullarkey. It's not Ruffy, guys. It's Ruffy. Don't forget, we're in Brazil. Odds for this one have Ruffy minus 205, Mullarkey plus 175. So this is Ruffy's debut. He didn't look really amazing on the Contender Series. He was actually down 2-0 on 2 cards there and came back for a big round 3 finish. I mean, he looked like a good boxer, good leg kicks. He was up at welterweight in that fight. He's dropping down to 155 here. I'm not really blown away with this guy, so I'm not interested in him at minus 200 at all. But on the other hand, Jamie Mullarkey has been looking worse and worse lately, man. This guy's just getting knocked out left and right. I mean, he's been knocked out 5 times in his career, knocked out 3 times in the UFC, and even some of the fights where he didn't get knocked out, the Brad Riddell fight, he took an absolute thrashing. Michael Johnson, he got dropped in that fight. I just don't think this guy's chin and defense can absorb strikes anymore, and he's only 29 years old, but I think he's not able to take these shots as well as he once was, and his chin has already fallen off. So it's a bit of it could be a bit naive to fade a 29-year-old's durability. It is pretty soon, but I just have no interest in the guy, right? At this point, I think that Ruffy's calf kick and punches should be landing here, but Mullarkey, I think, could hustle his way to a decision. I think the fight going the distance at plus 200 is very off, considering that I don't think Mullarkey is going to finish him. Mullarkey's finishing ability is pretty weak, even when he gets on top. It's pretty weak. So I think that honestly Mullarkey's going to need takedowns here. I think on the feet, I just don't trust his chin. I think that the calf kick and the punches of Ruffy will be landing here. So I think Mullarkey's going to need to wrestle to win here. And his subline is at 20-1. So I think if he's winning, I think it's correlated to getting takedowns. And then if he's getting takedowns, I think the sub at 20-1 is going to look like a live bet there. So I haven't bet that one yet. I don't think it's quite as good of a stab as the Barbosa KO, as I just mentioned, but I think I'm going to probably donate a little bit on the Mullarkey sub. And in general, I think the fight, Ruffy ITD at minus 140 is just too much. We don't know enough about this guy for him to be favored at almost 60% to finish Mullarkey. So plus 200 for the goes the distance. Even the over 1.5 I think are good looks here. I would just be looking to play the fight to go long, but very low conviction fight for that. No wagers placed on that one so far. We're going to be moving on to the lightweight division also. Joaquim Silva taking on Dzhokhar Klose. Odds for this one have Klose as the minus 170 favorite, Joaquim Silva as the plus 145 dog. So the first Brazilian underdog on the card here, and I think it's actually correct. I just think that Dzhokhar Klose is the better MMA fighter, really in all areas. I would say except for jiu-jitsu, Dzhokhar Klose is better everywhere. I think he's more experienced. I think his cardio is better, striking better, and even his wrestling is likely better as well. So Joaquim Silva's been more active lately. He had a pretty long hiatus where he was only fighting, once a year, once every 2 years. This will be his 4th fight in 18 months, but the guys he's beaten, Clay Guida, Jesse Ronson, just old, ancient fighters. I wasn't impressed by either of those wins, especially the Clay Guida win. That was very underwhelming, 2 rounds to 1. Clay Guida had it 1-1 going into the third and just didn't do anything in the third round. So Neto was able to win that one. But I don't know, man. I think that Jakar is going to be outstriking him pretty clearly here. I favor his cardio and his durability a lot more. And yeah, I just expect Jakar to win this one without a ton of trouble. And I think he should be a little bit bigger of a favorite here. I have a bet on Jakar at minus 156. I think anything under minus 200 is worth, a unit and a half max. Because I trust Jakar here more consistent. And I think Jakar's win against Rafa Garcia actually was a good performance from him. I liked how he looked there. He handled Brennan Jennings as he should, just destroyed him. The Joe Selecki fight was pretty random. He slammed him and knocked him out. So I think it's been a while since we've actually got to see Jakar in a really competitive fight. It's been since the Garcia fight, but I think that he's pretty well equipped to deal with Silva here, and he will get the win by either late finish or by decision. I imagine decision is the most favorite outcome here by far. Close. ITD is more favored than decision. I don't know if I agree with that, man. Close KO plus 170. That's no good. I mean, I do think that he has potential to hurt Silva on the feet here bad, but man, those odds are just not enticing enough for me. So I guess close by decision is the more valuable bet, but just stick with the money line in my opinion. Enough said about that one. Moving on to a fight in the featherweight division, Jean Silva taking on William Gomis. Odds to this one have a near pick'em at minus 115 for Jean Silva, minus 105 for Gomis. Two-way action coming in on this one. More action this week on Gomis. And initially, before I looked into this one, I was thinking Gomis would win, but then after watching some more footage, I'm now thinking Jean Silva is going to win. And Jean Silva, I just think, is the much more convincing and aggressive striker of the two. William Gomis, his striking is very pussy mode. He circles, he's evasive, he's risk adverse, which isn't a bad fighting style, but it's just not fun to watch. And he just throws single shots. He doesn't throw combinations. He's just a very noodly kickboxer. And he can hit some takedowns at times, some body lock trip takedowns, but I have seen nothing good from his top game, and I don't think his takedown arsenal is very deep either. So if he's hitting takedowns on Jean here, I don't think he's doing much with them. I think Jean will get back to the feet. And I could see Jean struggling with the distance here because Gomis is evasive and elusive, as I was saying. So he's going to have to track him down. But Jean Silva is the much harder boxer. He throws good elbows. He's aggressive. He's high output. I've been impressed with his cardio so far. So I just think he's going to track Gomis down and eventually corner him and land him some big shots. And I just see Silva as so much more damaging in this fight. So I'm glad I looked into this one. I'm going to be betting Silva, but I'm going to wait because this line seems to be trending very towards Gomis. Gomis was plus 130, I believe, at the beginning of the week or something, and now he's all the way down to plus 130 just a few days ago, 4 or 5 days ago, and now he's all the way down to near pick'em. So wait and take Jean Silva once the line plateaus a little bit, but I'm pretty confident in Silva. This is going to be a 1.5 to a 2 unit bet for me. I would say probably one of my favorite money lines on the card. I'll get to another one later that I like a lot, but I would say, that's my favorite money line on the entire card, Jean Silva. Moving on to the prelim in the lightweight division again, Elvis Brenner taking on Matabek Orolbai. Odds for this one have Orolbai is the favorite, minus 242, Elvis Brenner plus 207. A fight I've had my eye on for a while here. And I actually did bet Orolbai already at minus 175. Orolbai is dropping down to 155 here, where he has fought before. He did debut at 170 versus Uros Medic. Very good performance there. Win is, I think aging well. Uros got a big knockout win last fight, and I think that Uros will continue to do well. I think the guy's a really solid striker, and that win for Orolbai was good. I mean, he ate some big shots early on. Didn't seem to phase him one bit, and he just took him down, grinded him out, took him down over and over again, had a good leg lace game, he knows how to control the wrists, and his striking, for a guy who's predominantly a wrestler, Orolbai's striking is very good, I would say. We see so many of these Caucasus fighters who are predominant wrestlers who have ugly striking. But Orolbai knows how to move. He knows how to keep his feet underneath him. All of his offensive strikes look crisp. And I just think this guy's got a great chin as well. He is cutting down to 155 here. It's a little bit of a concern, but he has fought there before, so I don't think I'm very concerned about this. And for Brenner, this guy is just a very wild fighter. You know, he's a shoot the box fighter, so he's got that wild brawling style, but I don't think his takedown defense is very good at all. I don't think his ability to avoid being pinned to the cage, his ability to avoid being pinned to the cage is awful, quite frankly. I mean, the Tukagov fight, the fight against Guram, he was just very easily backed up there. And Brenner's chin on the feet is not good either. I think Orolbai has real good potential to hurt him on the feet here. But eventually I think that Orolbai will take this fight to the floor and get his grappling going. And Brenner is just bad off of his back, man. He's looking for submissions and he's not good at getting back up to his feet. And I think he's probably going to get worked on top position here. So I think it's going to be a convincing Orolbai win. Not sure whether it's going to be a finish. It really could be all three ways for Orolbai here. I think I could see him dropping him on the feet and going for a ground and pound finish. I could see him cranking a submission like he did on Medic. Or I could see him just dominating his way and Brenner being tough and surviving his way to a dominant decision loss. So I think Brenner or Orolbai's points handicap is good at -3.5, around -125. I saw it on DraftKings. They have those, and let's check out what it's at on Bet Online. I did see the fight to end KO as +270. I think that's maybe a good stab because if Brenner's winning the fight, it has to be by KO. I mean, he can't win this fight any other way, in my opinion. You know, at a real predictable rate. So -3.5, yeah, -125 for Orolbai. That's a good addition to his money line because it's hard to imagine him winning this fight, you know, without it being extremely dominant. I don't think Orolbai is winning a 29-28 here. So Montebec should roll here, the caveman. And we're moving on. Still on the prelims. A lot of fucking prelims in this card. Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Yasmin Lucindo in the women's strawweight division here. We have Lucindo as the -400 favorite. Karolina coming back at +330. Crazy fucking line here, guys. I mean, Karolina is on a hot streak. She's on 4 wins in a row. She's been looking good. She had a real rough patch where she lost 5 fights in a row. She took a little bit of a layoff. She came back and she's been looking good. Now, against, you know, inferior competition, against women that she should be beating. But the market's been kind of underrating her. I mean, she's been very playable in a lot of these fights. She's been a slight favorite, a pick'em favorite in all 4 of those fights, and she's won all 4 convincingly. 3 unanimous decisions and a finish. So I think the market is underrating Karolina consistently over the past 2 years, and I think they're doing it again here. I mean, Lucindo, she is more physical. She looks like a good prospect. She's real young, only 22 years old. She can, you know, has good physicality to get some takedowns. I think her boxing is pretty solid as well. However, you know, her record before she got to the UFC was very padded, very, you know, bum fighters. She lost to Yaraguri in a close fight, and then she beat Brogan Walker, who's a bum, Viana, who's a bum, and now she's 80% favorite against the best fighter she's ever fought. Karolina, former title challenger. I would argue that the current version of Yasmin Yaraguri is probably better than Karolina, but still, career-wise, Karolina is the toughest opponent Lucindo's fought. I just don't see where Lucindo is going to be 80% here. I think that she could muscle her way to some takedowns and get on top and be safe on top. But if the fight stays in the feet, if it goes to the clinch, I mean, Karolina is skilled in all those areas. Karolina can also hit her own takedowns. I mean, she's just a very well-rounded women's fighter, one of my favorite women's fighters of all time. And I just think she's getting underrated here. So +330, totally worth the bet. Small bet, you know, half unit to a unit on Karolina. And the only way I see Lucindo covering -400 easy is by getting consistent takedowns and just, you know, smothering Karolina on top. But I mean, Lucindo has only done that to women that are significantly worse than Karolina. So I'm not sure where 80% confidence comes for her. Small bet on Karolina. Happy to make it. I've been betting on her in a lot of her recent fights, and I'm happy to do so again here at the best number we've got in a while at +330. So love that one there. And we're moving on to Also, one more note about that fight. The fight to go the distance is -170. I think that's worth the bet as well. I have already placed a wager on that. It's -180. But I mean, 60 below 65%. I mean, what's the most common finish there? I don't think Carolina's finishing her. Lucindo knockout? I mean, I don't know, man. They have Lucindo sub 320. That would surprise me, man. That would really surprise me for Lucindo to sub Carolina. Carolina's a tough girl, and I don't know, man. I don't see it. The women who have finished Carolina are much better than Lucindo. So I like the fight to go the distance in Carolina there. Moving on to the last fight on the prelims, we're finally there in the featherweight division. Joe Anderson Brito taking on Jack Shore. Odds for this one have Brito as the favorite, -164. Jack Shore +144 coming back. I have no faith in Jack Shore. This guy's a bantamweight. I don't know what he's doing fighting at featherweight, but he looks chubby. I mean, the Makwan Amirkhani fight, in the cage there, this guy had almost no muscle definition. I don't know why he's moving up to 145, but I think that Brito is not a good matchup for him either. Brito is extremely strong for the weight class, and I think early on Brito is going to hoss him around. I don't see why Brito just can't get easy takedowns here. I mean, if you watch the Makwan Amirkhani fight, Makwan shoots a takedown on Shore, and Shore topples over. I mean, he doesn't even come close to defending or stopping the takedown. And then he lays on his back for almost 2 minutes. He attempts a bullshit omoplata that he doesn't do anything with, and then he just lays there. So that could have been strategic from Shore because he knows that Makwan slows down and all he has to do is just survive an extra couple of minutes. He gets to round 2 and Makwan will be gassed out. But still, that was a bad look. And Shore has been just not a great defensive wrestler throughout his career. A lot of his wins are him just out-grappling really bad grapplers, and that's not Brito. Brito is a strong, athletic guy. I think he provides problems for Shore on the feet in addition to on the ground as well. The only way I see Shore winning the fight is by Brito really slowing down and Shore taking over in the second or third rounds. I'm very much expecting Brito to get off to a big early start here, win the first round, possibly even go on to win the second or finish him. But this current price, I think it's Brito or pass. I think that you're way better off waiting for a live bet on Jack Shore because I think he's really going to struggle with the takedowns and the physicality of Joe Anderson Brito here. So Brito or pass. And in terms of, I haven't made any bets on this fight yet, but I do think that you're probably pretty safe taking Joe Anderson before the fight, and then maybe if it's looking a little sketchy, you trade out for the live line. Yeah, I also like maybe Brito by decision +350. So they have Brito and Shore to win by decision at the same number. I don't think that's correct because I think Brito is very, very likely to win the first round here, like 80% likely to win the first round. And I don't think his cardio is that bad either. Brito's the last guy to defeat Diego Lopes, guys. Don't forget that. All right, main card time. As I mentioned at the start of the card, first 3 fights, all huge favorites, not really compelling fights, but then the co-main and the main are real good. So, first fight, main card, Caio Borralho taking on Paul Craig, middleweight division. Odds for this one have Borralho -645, Craig +470. So Paul Craig, extremely flawed fighter, but I think that Caio isn't the worst matchup for him, to be honest. And Paul Craig is such a volatile and high variance fighter that putting him at below 20% I think is a little foolish at times. I mean, we saw Nikita Krylov pounding Craig's head into the mat, seconds away from getting a knockout, and then Paul Craig triangles him and submits him. I mean, this guy has defied expectations and the odds several times in his career, and at below 20%, I think Craig is the side here. Obviously, I mean, you're not going to be laying 86% on Borralho at -600 or more, but on the feet, Borralho is going to be much quicker, and I think he should be able to outstrike Paul Craig pretty easily. Craig's striking is just horrible, and we saw Borralho working on his striking in his last fight. He outstruck Abus Magomedov the majority of that fight. And then if this fight ends up on the floor, though, you always got to be concerned about Craig. I mean, he's not a traditionally good grappler. However, this guy is opportunistic as hell. And Borralho had some moments in the Mahmoud Muradov fight where he was a little sloppy. He was a little overzealous. He went for back takes, and he lost the back takes. And I think that it's just very possible that when these two tie up and they get in scrambles with one another, that Craig could either get on top, he could get a reversal or a sweep or even a submission attempt that makes him seem much more live than below 20%. So I think that Craig money line worth a really small bet, half unit or less, honestly, because there's a good chance that Borralho keeps it on the feet, outstrikes him, wins the rounds, and just wins in a nice easy decision here. And Caio has been very risk adverse in his UFC career so far. He's won a lot of decisions against fighters that he probably had the ability to finish, and he is favored at nearly 60% to win this one inside the distance. I don't think that's any good, man. I think that playing maybe Borralho by decision is the angle I would look for playing Borralho. But man, I don't know. I mean, the fight is minus 200, 67% to go over 1.5 rounds. So I don't see where the Borralho finish at nearly 60% is coming from. So the fight going the distance and Caio decision are interesting bets to me, but I don't know. I think I'm going to stick with just a small bet on Craig money line and just hope for the best. Moving on to the Premier Division as well. Michel Pereira taking on Ihor Potieria. Odds for this one have Michel minus 700, Potieria plus 500. So Michel shouldn't have too much trouble here, man. I mean, he is the much better striker. Ihor is extremely hittable and, doesn't really have a real A game to anything that he does. But Michel Pereira is fighting at 185 here. And in the UFC, he's had 2 185 fights. They've both gone 1 minute. The last time he fought at 185 before that, Duško Todorovic knocked him out at the end of the first round. So Michel Pereira hasn't been out of the first round at 185 ever in his career. I think he had one fight at like 205 where he went into the second round. But what I'm saying is that Michel Pereira isn't really reliable enough of a fighter to be minus 700. I mean, we've seen this guy lose fights before, the Tristan Connolly fight, obviously, where and the Diego Sanchez fight, where he had no business losing to those guys, and his own dumb decision making and mid fight IQ led to him losing those fights. One by DQ, one by him just torrentially gassing out and getting out grappled by Connolly there. And I don't know, man. I just think that it's possible that Pereira dumps his gas tank and somehow Potieria is fresher in the second and third round. Potieria did look, rejuvenated at 185, right? I mean, we had a lot of questions. I made a horrible betting against Ihor in his last fight on Bryzek, and Potieria looked good there, his best he's ever looked. So I think this 185 weight cut for Ihor is a good He's probably going to get sparked in the first round here, but plus 500, man, I don't knock a stab on it. I really don't. I mean, these guys are going to swing at each other in round one, and I don't think it's the worst underdog bet. So I really think that Craig, Potieria, and Carolina are all good small dog shots. But I would say Carolina is the best of all of them, and keep the Ihor and Craig ones to small, half unit bets at most. So moving on to an underdog who I don't have any faith in the light heavyweight division, Vitor Petrino taking on Anthony Smith. Odds for this one have Vitor minus 550, Smith plus 400. Now, experience-wise, Anthony Smith has a major advantage, and he has won a lot of fights against better fighters than Petrino over his career. However, this guy is deep into his career. He's almost at 20 MMA losses. And I just don't want to live in a world where Anthony Smith wins this fight. Vitor Petrino is a cool, young, athletic, well-rounded prospect at 205. One of the only prospects we've had at 205 in forever, quite frankly. And I think this guy is just an exciting guy to watch fight. And when he grapples, he's not the most exciting, but this guy is an insane athlete. And I think he's really well skilled for the weight class at only, 26 years old, I believe. And I just want this guy to win. And I want him to keep, climbing the ladder. And Anthony Smith is a litmus test. I really hope that he loses here, and I hope that he gets hurt bad. I hate Anthony Smith. I don't know how you couldn't hate Anthony Smith. This guy is one of the most unlikable fighters in MMA history. And every fucking 3 months, a clip comes out of Anthony Smith saying, "Yeah, I think I could beat John Jones. I think I could beat Alex Pereira. I think I could beat Israel Adesanya." I mean, this guy is just a fucking nut job. And I don't know, man. I just really hope that Vitor hurts him here. He's been finished 15 times in his MMA career. Let's hope we make it a 16 with a nasty knockout where they have to, bring the stretcher out for Anthony Smith here. So, yeah, no real thoughts on bets on this one. Let me just give a glance and see if I have any. The GTD at plus 200, even though I just talked about Anthony Smith getting laid the fuck out. The GTD at it got bet a little bit. It's plus 170 now. It was plus 200, but I mean, we did just see Vitor Petrino take Anton Turkalij and Tyson Pedro, 2 bums, to decision. So I could see Smith, toughen his way out to a decision here, especially if Petrino starts grappling, which I think is pretty likely here. Petrino does seem to like to grapple a good bit, and I think he will be able to take down Smith, but I don't think he's going to get any super dominant positions over Smith and finish him super easily. I think Petrino finishing the fight is very correlated to a standing knockout, and I think that the line Petrino ITD 60% is no good, man. So fight to go the distance plus 170, and then Vitor by decision plus 240 are the interesting bets in this one for me. Fingers crossed they lose though, and fingers crossed we get a nice Vitor Petrino highlight reel knockout. Co-main event time. The King of Rio, the greatest fighter to ever fight in mixed martial arts. Yes, you heard me correctly. Jose Aldo taking on Jonathan Martinez in the bantamweight division. Aldo coming off of a little less than a 2-year layoff, right? Let's see, Merab was in August of 22. Yep, so about 21 months off. And the odds for this one have Martinez minus 142, Jose Aldo plus 122. So, massive fan of Jose Aldo, favorite fighter ever. So I'm going to be a little biased, but fuck it. I mean, who isn't biased? I'll tell you who is going to be biased here. These Brazilian judges, right? Because this fight is obviously in Brazil. The fight is minus 210 to go to the decision. 260 to go over 2.5 rounds. So it's very, very likely this fight is going to a decision. And it's going to be a striking fight, right? It's unlikely that either guy grapples here. Although I could see some clinching on Martinez's end, but I don't think the fight's hitting the floor. And I don't think either guy is convincingly out-grappling one another. So I think it's going to be a close striking decision where you have one significantly more beloved and notable fighter and hometown fighter, Jose Aldo, in front of the Brazilian crowd. And, you know, I'm not really banking on that too much, but I already made up my mind that I will be betting Aldo, and I wouldn't say I love the fight for him, but I think it's a winnable matchup for him. And it's a good matchup because they gave him a fighter relevant enough to be inspiring for Aldo to come back. You know, Martinez is on, I believe, a 6-fight win streak, but not as dominant of a fighter where I'm actually worried for Jose Aldo here. And it's a pretty simple breakdown in my opinion. I think a lot of people have the same, where Jonathan Martinez, his main strike is his leg kicks. He lights orthodox fighters inside lead leg up with his southpaw leg kick. Took me a while to get that out, but he destroys guys inside lead leg with that. However, Jose Aldo is one of the best kick defenders of all time. This guy checks kicks and has an incredible eye for striking and kicking exchanges, unlike any fighter ever. So the guys that Martinez have been easily leg kicking, like Jeunesse and Vince Morales and Cub Swanson, I don't think you can really compare them to Jose Aldo. I think Jose Aldo is going to be much more prepared to deal with checking those kicks. And then it's going to be forcing Martinez to use his hands a little bit more, where I don't think he's as fluid with his hands. I think he really shines with that leg kick I was talking about, the left body kick, the left teep, and the left knee. However, his hands I don't think are very good. And I do think that Jose Aldo, even at his age of, 37 now, even 20 years into his career, I think he is the better boxer of the two. And Aldo's been staying active boxing. He's been constantly working on his hands. He's been, staying in good shape. The pictures of him this week, he looks in great shape. And I think that Jose Aldo will be able to outbox Martinez here. And as long as he can deal with those kicks and not get his legs chewed up, I think he's going to be right in this fight. I think the left hook to the body of the southpaw Martinez is going to be there. We saw that land a lot versus Chito Vera, where orthodox or southpaw fighters, they have the right side of their torso where their liver is closer to their opponents that are orthodox, and Jose Aldo is going to be throwing that left hook to the body, and it's going to be targeting that liver, where body shots are the most effective. So I like that for Aldo here. And the one thing I could see Martinez having success on, which is an underrated part of this fight that really dawned on me last night when watching tape, is Martinez having offensive clinching success, because we've seen Aldo have a little bit of trouble keeping his back off the cage lately, right? Mostly versus, more physical guys like Volkanovski, like Merab Dvalishvili. However, Martinez does do some good work against the fence in the clinch. We saw that in the Said Nurmagomedov fight. He was able to do a lot of good work with his knees there. So look out for Martinez to try to use his size and maybe his strength advantage here to push him against the cage and to maybe land some knees to the thighs, to the body, just slow the fight down and not give Aldo his ideal range. But I don't know, man. Martinez doesn't really do that as his plan A. I don't think he's going to be coming out here looking to clinch like Merab and like Volkanovski was. So it's not a thing I'm super worried about, but it is a thought that I did have. So I think the fight should be a pick'em. It should be a 50-50 fight. It should be maybe even Aldo as a slight favorite. And I already placed a wager. Plus 130 for Aldo for me. Small bet on Aldo by KO at plus 700 as well. And you just got to cheer for the King of Rio here, man. I mean, we're not going to get many opportunities to bet on Jose Aldo ever again. And to me, I feel obligated to bet on him here. Because if we lose, okay, we went down with the ship. We bet on the greatest fighter ever coming back, fighting in Rio. We put our money where our mouth is, and we bet on one of my all-time favorite fighters. And if we win, oh boy, is it going to be sweet to cash a plus money Jose Aldo betting ticket in the year 2024 against a solid, reputable opponent in Jonathan Martinez as well. So, great fight here. Really looking forward to that one. And my pick is Aldo by 29-28. Okay, time for the main event. The flyweight championship fight between Alexandre Pantoja and Steve Erceg. Odds for this one have Pantoja minus 180, Erceg plus 155. So, when this was first announced, you saw people saying, Who is this guy? Oh, this division sucks. Shut the fuck up. If you said that, you're an idiot who doesn't watch fights. And, I mean, flyweight has been a division plagued by rematches. We've seen so many rematches at 125 that it's nice to have a fresh new fight. Pantoja fought Moreno. That was his third time fighting him. Pantoja fought Royval twice. He's already fought Figueiredo. Figueiredo and Moreno fought 4 times. I mean, these guys, we're just seeing so many rematches and so many of the same fights. It's just refreshing to have a nice, new matchup here. And if you go through the list of guys at flyweight, a lot of them are injured. Albazi, Kaikar France are injured. There's another one too I'm forgetting. Nobody wants to see Mohamed Mokaev get a title shot. That fucking gimp. Manal Kape just had to pull out of a fight. Nicolau and Perez just fought, and they don't really deserve it either because they're only coming off of 1 win in a row, or now Nicolau's coming off of 2 losses in a row. So, obviously, Pantoja just beat Royval, just beat Moreno. So there really aren't many options. So Steve Erceg, he's only had 3 fights in the UFC in just 11 months, but he's looked promising. The guy's a well-rounded fighter. He's coming off of a highlight reel knockout. Sure, give the guy an opportunity. There was a time, guys, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but, 10, 15 years ago, fighters would win 3 or 4 fights in a row and regularly get title shots. We've gotten used to somehow fighters getting, 8, 9, 10 fight win streaks and then getting a title shot, but that's really not the way it should go. So I like this fight, and obviously by the line, Pantoja's about a 65% favorite. Obviously, it's a competitive fight. So if anybody was complaining about this fight being made, I think you're just being proven wrong over and over again. And even if the fight is dominant for one guy, even if Pantoja wins dominantly, I still like this fight and I'm looking forward to it. So let's get into the matchup. I have a bet here on Pantoja to win by submission or decision, -115. And it's tough to really envision how the fight's going to go, because Steve Erceg hasn't been really out-grappled throughout his career. We've seen him taken down for moments and bits and pieces, but he's done a good job defending, getting back up to his feet. And as far as I can tell, we haven't seen Erceg, out-grappled for 3-4 minutes, an entire round ever. So it's hard to really know how he's going to do against the offensive onslaught of grappling that Pantoja can put against you. On the feet, I think Erceg is probably going to be the more comfortable fighter. I think this guy is very long and has a good understanding of boxing. His defense is a bit suspect and his chin isn't that great either. However, Pantoja's boxing is not his strong suit, and he kind of tends to blitz in, throwing wild combinations. I don't think that's a style of striking that's going to give Erceg problems. If Erceg were fighting Manel Kape, I think he would be in big trouble and he would probably get knocked out. However, Pantoja isn't that type of dangerous boxer who's going to really punish Erceg for his sloppy defensive boxing. So I think on the feet, it's going to favor Steve Erceg. However, Pantoja, he just puts a pace on these guys, man. His cardio is miraculous. He has that cardio like, DDP a little bit, where he looks like he's slowing down. He looks like he's gassing, and he just doesn't stop coming. And he's gone 5 rounds, back-to-back fights. The Royval fight wasn't very high paced. He won that one, pretty easily without a lot of resistance. But the Moreno fight was extremely high paced, and he still held up well cardio wise in the later rounds of that fight. So I think Pantoja's cardio has looked great lately. Erceg has been scheduled to fight 5 rounds once at 125, but that fight only lasted, I think, 2 minutes. So the cardio-wise, the 5-round experience is big in favor of Pantoja. The UFC experience and all of the fighters that Pantoja has gotten wins over vary in his favor. I think that Pantoja is the much better grappler of the two, and he will likely at some point in this fight just start taking over with his just non-stop takedowns, his back takes, his control on the ground, and he's eventually just going to out-grapple Erceg and probably win the fight. I would say fairly dominantly down the stretch. I think it's going to be a little sketchy for him early. I think Erceg has a window to win. I think his best chance is honestly to win by knockout in the first or second round. I have a hard time seeing Erceg winning the fight outside of, an early knockout. It would shock me to see Erceg win a decision. It would shock me to see Erceg win by submission. And even a late knockout for Erceg would surprise me. So I think Pantoja is going to have a rough moment or two early on here, but eventually he's going to take over in the 3rd round. And the 4th and 5th, I believe, should be all him. And I'm not sure whether he's going to get a finish, a submission or not. But I'll pick a submission, a 4th round submission for Alexandre Pantoja. I think he's going to really show his experience in the later rounds here with his grappling and take over and win the fight via 4th round sub. So I like that sub decision line. It's a good way to shave about 10 to 15% off of the money line. I don't think the Pantoja KO is that high at all. Even if it's on the ground, I don't think ground and pound is super likely, and on the feet, I don't think a KO for Pantoja is likely either. So I like that sub decision line to shave off a few cents for Pantoja, and great fight. Looking forward to it. I wish Erceg the best. I don't hope he wins here. I definitely am cheering for Pantoja, but I like seeing the guy get the opportunity, and it's been nice to see him in the UFC so far. So wish him the best, and that'll do it for this card. I like Kevin Borjas. I like Barbosa by KO. The goes the distance in the Ruffy fight. Jakar Close moneyline. Gene Silva moneyline. I have Orolbai moneyline at the early prices, and the Orolbai points handicap. Small bets on the big dogs, Carolina, Craig, and Ihor. And then I also think Brito moneyline is value. I think the goes the distance and the Petrino decision is value. I like the Aldo moneyline. And I like Alexandre Pantoja by submission or points. So, best bet on the card for me, I mentioned earlier, Gene Silva. And then I also like Kevin Borjas a lot. I like Aldo a lot. Jakar Close, Carolina. And, keep the dog shots small. Keep the dog shots on Craig and Potieria small. And some of these goes the distance that I mentioned, I do like them. I haven't bet them yet, and honestly, this year I've been sucking with betting goes the distances. So maybe tread very lightly on those ones, though, guys. So thank you all for listening. Hope you all enjoy the fights. Win some bets. I'll see you before the next UFC card next week. Peace out, everyone.